when Shaquille O'Neal pulled the 1998 Buick Century into the service bay at Hollis Brothers Auto and Tire on a Wednesday morning in October. The shop's radio was playing something with too much bass and not enough treble. Two ceiling-mounted fans were pushing the smell of motor oil and old rubber around without actually moving it anywhere. And the fluorescent light above Bay 2 was flickering at the exact frequency that gives a person a headache inside of 10 minutes. He had driven 45 minutes to be here. He was wearing a plain gray baseball cap pulled low, dark jeans with a small paint stain on the left thigh, and a black crewneck that said absolutely nothing about him. No security, no assistant, no jewelry, 4 championships, a business portfolio spanning real estate, entertainment, and ventures in 7 states. A net worth that crossed $400 million before his 40th birthday. And he was standing in a Newark, New Jersey service bay, handing his keys to a man who had looked at the Buick for 3 seconds, looked at the man who stepped out of it, and already started writing. The estimate came back across the counter in under 4 minutes. Rear brake assembly, full resurfacing, fluid flush and bleed, parts and labor, $1,420. Darnell Hollis did not look up when he slid it across. Shaquille O'Neal looked at the number. Then he looked at Darnell Hollis. Then he said, quietly, without any change in his expression, "Sounds fair." He folded the estimate once and put it in his back pocket. He sat down in the plastic chair by the window. And he waited. He had noticed 3 things from the moment the Buick turned off the street. The first was the sign above the entrance, Hollis Brothers Auto and Tire in red block letters, but the S at the end of Brothers was a slightly different shade of red than the rest of the letters. Newer paint, as if someone had replaced it at some point and could not find an exact match for the original color. He noticed it and kept moving. The second thing was the framed price board on the wall behind the service counter, handwritten in black marker in a style so careful and deliberate it belonged to someone who understood that what they were writing was meant to last. Oil change, $18. Full brake service, $95. The prices were from a different era. The handwriting was not Darnell's. He noticed that too and kept moving. The third thing was taped to the side of the cash register, a child's crayon drawing of a building with 3 bay doors and a sign that read Hollis Auto in the large. Uneven letters of a child concentrating hard on getting something right. At the bottom of the drawing, in red crayon, a name, Cece. And below the name, a date, 2 years ago. He looked at that drawing for exactly as long as he looked at the price board and the sign. He sat down in the plastic chair. He said nothing about any of it. Now here is the part that nobody inside Hollis Brothers Auto and Tire understood that Wednesday morning. Not Darnell Hollis, capping the pen he had used to write the estimate. Not the 24-year-old mechanic in Bay 3 who had seen the number go across the counter and was now tightening a bolt he did not need to tighten because he did not know what else to do with his hands. Not the woman in the dry cleaning shop next door who had been watching through her plate glass window from the moment the Buick pulled in. What Shaquille O'Neal had known before he ever handed over the keys, before the estimate came back at $1,420, before he said "sounds fair" and folded the paper and sat down, was one single fact that would rewrite everything that happened in this garage from this point forward. He had been carrying it for 3 weeks. And trust me, you are not going to see this ending coming. Stay with us for the entire video, because what unfolds here this morning changes the lives of 4 people in ways none of them could have designed on their own. Shaquille Rashawn O'Neal was born in Newark in March of 1972. And Newark in 1972 was not a city that offered many soft landings. His mother, Lucille O'Neal, was 20 years old. She was small, physically, barely there, but she carried something inside that had no visible limit and spent no time apologizing for it. She raised him in public housing with a discipline that came not from anger, but from a refusal so absolute and so consistent that it became the structure of the household the way beams become the structure of a building. Invisible, necessary, not negotiable. She had one sentence she said across his childhood so many times it stopped being a sentence and became something closer to the air in the apartment. We don't beg, and we don't brag. We work, and we trust God, and we keep it between us and Him. He heard it at breakfast. He heard it after games. He heard it after scholarships and after championships, and after his name was printed in newspapers in 14 countries. She never stopped saying it. He never stopped hearing it. His father, Philip Harrison, was a U.S. Army sergeant, structured down to his bones, a man who ran the household with the kind of discipline that produces sons who do not flinch easily, who understand that stillness is not the same as weakness. Philip had a phrase he said so often that it crossed from advice into instruction. Don't be a reaction. Be a response. He said it when Shaq was cut from a team. He said it when he failed a test. He said it when someone made a remark at school about his size or his clothes or the block he came from. He would hear that phrase again today in a garage in Newark, though Philip Harrison would not be the one saying it. But the man who taught Shaquille O'Neal the specific thing about cars, about money, about how to move through a world that will try to read you in the first 3 seconds and make a decision based on what it reads, that man was neither of his parents. His name was Eugene Weeks. He ran a small grocery store on the corner of 17th Avenue and Clinton Place in Newark for 22 years. He was not famous. He was not wealthy. He was the kind of man who was in the same place every morning at the same time and kept his word, and knew the name of every child who had ever bought something from his store. And that consistency, across 22 years, had made him something more durable than famous. It had made him trusted. Eugene drove a 1979 Pontiac, battered, beige, invisible. His store was doing well enough that it did not need to be. Shaq was 11 years old the first time he asked Eugene why he didn't drive something better. Eugene put his change on the counter and looked at him for a moment with the expression of a man deciding whether or not to spend something valuable. Then he said it. The car is bait, son. What you drive tells people what they think they can take from you. I drive to get where I'm going. He went back to counting. He said nothing else on the subject. He did not need to. Eugene Weeks closed his store in 1998. When the new rent was a number his numbers could not answer. He died in 2003. He never drove anything other than that Pontiac. The 1998 Buick Century parked in Bay 1 at Hollis Brothers Auto and Tire, silver gray, faded. A long scratch along the rear quarter panel. Shaq had bought it from an estate sale 18 months ago and kept it precisely for days like this one. Not for sentiment, for use. He drove it to get where he was going. He drove it so nobody would look twice. Then he left Newark, went to El Soo, went first overall in the 1992 draft, won 4 championships, built a portfolio in real estate and entertainment and food franchises that would outlast his playing career by 20 years, gave to foundations and communities and individuals without making announcements about it, because Lucille O'Neal had been very clear on the subject of announcements. And on a Wednesday morning in October, he drove the Buick 45 minutes because Eugene Weeks had been right about something. He could still hear him. Darnell Hollis was born in the apartment above this shop in the fall of 1983, the second of 2 sons, the one who stayed. His father, Cecil Hollis Sr., had opened Hollis Brothers Auto and Tire in 1984 with a $4,000 loan from his brother Raymond, Raymond being the other brother in the name above the door. who moved to Atlanta in 1991 and never came back to the business, but never asked Cecil to take his name off the sign. It was Raymond's way of remaining attached to something he had walked away from. Cecil Sr. ran the shop for 38 years. He was, by every account of every person who ever brought a car to him, the most honest mechanic in a 2-mile radius. He had a laminated card behind the register, not framed, not decorated, just laminated, that read, "This shop doesn't steal, it serves." C. Hollis Sr., 1984. He pointed to it when he trained each new employee. He pointed to it when Darnell joined the shop at 19 and began learning the work. Darnell Hollis ran the shop the way his father ran it for 3 full years. Then his father had a stroke in the second bay on a Tuesday afternoon in the fall of 2021 and did not come back. He was alive. He was in a nursing home 12 minutes away, able to squeeze Darnell's hand when he visited, but unable to say his son's name. The shop's lease was in Cecil Sr.'s name. When the building sold to a new landlord 18 months later, the rate went to $6,400 a month, $2,100 more than the previous figure. Applied against a 3-year agreement Darnell had signed without reading the escalation clause closely enough. Because he had been reading it at the end of a 16-hour day and his eyes had not been doing what he needed them to do. He was 4 months behind. A certified letter had arrived, 30 days. He had gone to bed the night before the Wednesday that Shaq walked in staring at the water stain above his bed, doing the arithmetic that broke people do when the numbers have stopped being theoretical. He was not a dishonest man. He had become a frightened one. The estimate, $1,420 for a job worth $340, was the math of a man who was one payment from losing the last thing his father had left him. He had written the number before he fully decided to write it. The second the pen lifted from the paper, something in him knew. He said nothing. He slid it across. In Bay 3, 24-year-old Marcus Okafor had been watching the service counter since the estimate went across it. 3 years at Hollis Brothers, started as a lot attendant, learned the trade from Cecil Sr. during the overlap before the stroke, become a genuinely skilled technician in the way people become skilled at things when someone patient teaches them with actual care. He had seen the quote. He had run the number in his head the same way he ran diagnostics, systematically, looking for what did not fit, and the number did not fit. He had said nothing, because the rent was due and he needed this job, and he was tightening a bolt he did not need to tighten, and pointing his face at the floor. In the dry cleaning shop next door, at the plate glass window she had stood at for 22 years, Vera Simmons watched the man in the gray cap unfold the estimate and look at it, and fold it back, and put it in his pocket. Vera had known Cecil Sr. since before Darnell was born. She had brought food to the shop after the stroke. She watched this building the way you watch something you have loved for a long time and are afraid of losing. She pressed her fingers to the glass. She did not move. Then, 4 minutes after the estimate went across the counter, something happened that she was not expecting. A woman came in through the side door of the shop, early 40s, a leather portfolio under one arm, moving with the quiet, directed efficiency of someone who does not need to announce what she is there to do. She walked directly to Darnell Hollis at the counter and spoke to him without raising her voice. His face did not change color. It did not need to. The change happened somewhere behind his eyes. He turned and looked at the man in the gray cap sitting in the plastic chair by the window. The man in the gray cap was already looking at him. He did not look away. He did not smile. He waited. The woman was a real estate attorney named Patricia Ware, and she had asked for Darnell Hollis by name because she was delivering closing documents. Not a summons. Not an eviction. Closing documents for the commercial sale of the building at 114 South Orange Avenue. The building that housed Hollis Brothers Auto and Tire, which had been purchased in a private transaction 2 days earlier. She placed the documents on the counter and confirmed his identity and told him the new owner would like to discuss lease terms at his earliest convenience. She did not tell him the owner's name. It was in the documents if he read them, which he had not yet done because his hands were not behaving the way he needed them to. Marcus Okafor had set down his wrench. Vera Simmons, through the plate glass window, had gone completely still. And here is where you are going to have to wait just a little longer, because before you see what Darnell Hollis found when he opened those pages, before you see what happened when he looked back across the shop at the man in the plastic chair, you need to feel the full weight of that laminated card behind the register. This shop doesn't steal. It serves. C. Hollis Sr., 1984. The man who had written that had been sitting in a bed 12 minutes away for 3 years, unable to say his son's name. The estimate on the counter said $1,420. The two things were in the same room, and the room had become very quiet. Darnell Hollis found the section in the closing documents listing the purchasing entity. He read the name. He put the pages down on the counter very carefully, the way you put something down when your hands are no longer reliable, and he looked across the service bay at the man in the gray baseball cap sitting in the plastic chair. Nobody spoke. The ceiling fan turned. The radio played. The fluorescent light above Bay 2 kept flickering. The room held its breath. Shaquille O'Neal stood up. He was 7 feet 1 inch tall, and in the low-ceilinged service area of Hollis Brothers Auto and Tire, this was no longer possible to misread. He walked to the counter. Darnell Hollis looked up at him with the expression of a man who has just understood two things simultaneously and is trying to decide which one to address first. Shaq did not take off the cap. He reached into the front pocket of the crewneck and placed a folded piece of paper on the counter next to the closing documents. He unfolded it slowly. It was a letter, 3 pages, handwritten in pencil on wide-ruled notebook paper, in the rounded, careful script of a 14-year-old who was working very hard to be taken seriously. Darnell looked at the handwriting. He recognized it without needing to read a word. His son had not told him. He had been working 16-hour days for 4 months, and his son had sat at the kitchen table on a Sunday night, after his father fell asleep in the chair, still in his work clothes, and written 3 pages, and mailed them to a foundation address and asked for help. Because he was 14 years old and watching his father disappear, and the shop was still going to close. Cece wrote to my foundation 3 weeks ago, Shaq said. Quiet. No performance. He described the shop. He described your father. He described what you've been trying to do alone. He placed one hand flat on the counter, not on the letter. I had the building evaluated before I finished reading the letter. Darnell Hollis did not speak. The muscles in his jaw were working, but nothing was arriving. Marcus Okafor in Bay 3 was no longer pretending to do anything else. Your lease resets? Shaq said. Same rate your father had. Monthly permanent. Put it in the new agreement. He picked up the estimate, the $1,420 one, and placed it face up on the counter between them. He looked at it. Then he looked at Darnell. What does this brake job actually cost? Something moved behind Darnell's eyes. Not shame exactly, not panic exactly, but living between them, in a space that had no comfortable name. $340, he said. His voice was not steady. $345 at the outside. Shaq nodded once. Then, That's what I pay. He reached back into the crewneck pocket and placed a second card on the counter, not the foundation card. His personal number. I want Marcus Okafor leading this shop, he said. If he stays, you pay him accordingly. If this place needs capital to get properly equipped, call that number. He did not wait for a response. He walked to the wall behind the register and stood in front of the framed price board. Cecil Sr.'s handwriting, black marker, 1984. The careful letters that were meant to outlast whoever wrote them. He looked at it for a long moment. He said nothing about it. He walked back to Bay 1 and stood by the Buick and waited for his keys. Philip Harrison had said it 30 years ago in a Newark apartment. The phrase had been accurate then. It was accurate now. Don't be a reaction. Be a response. The response was standing in this garage. It had driven 45 minutes in a Buick that nobody looked twice at. And it was done. What Darnell Hollis had to understand in stages. Reading the closing documents at the counter after Patricia Ware left. After Marcus had come to stand beside him. After Vera Simmons had walked through the side door from the dry cleaning shop for the first time in 4 months, was how the letter had reached Shaquille O'Neal at all. Cecil Hollis III had found the Foundation's mailing address on a website. He had asked no one for permission. He had sat at the kitchen table on a Sunday night and written 3 pages in pencil and sealed the envelope himself and put it in the mailbox on the corner before anyone could tell him it wasn't worth trying. What he could not have known was that his grandfather, Cecil Hollis Sr., before the stroke, when he could still move freely through the world, had driven to a community hall in Newark in the spring of 2018 and sat in the back row and listened to a woman from Shaquille O'Neal's foundation give a presentation on small business support programs in underserved communities. And Cecil Sr. had come home and told Darnell about it. Darnell, who had half listened because he was under a transmission at the time. And Cecil Sr. had written the Foundation's mailing address in his small, careful handwriting on a piece of paper and put it in the desk drawer in the shop office. 3 years later, when the stroke had taken his voice and most of his movement, that piece of paper was still in the drawer, still in his handwriting. And on a Sunday night, when a 14-year-old went looking for an address, his father asleep in the chair, the shop 4 months behind, the certified letter on the kitchen counter, he opened the desk drawer in the shop office and found it. His grandfather had put it there for exactly this kind of emergency, without knowing what the emergency would be or when it would come. The letter crossed the Foundation's desk. It was flagged within 24 hours. A property records search followed. A real estate attorney was retained. And on a Wednesday morning in October, a 1998 Buick Century with a grinding rear brake turned off the street and pulled into a service bay. Nobody looked twice. Vera Simmons walked back into Hollis Brothers for the first time in 4 months and stood in the service area and cried quietly and did not apologize for it. Marcus Okafor put down the wrench he had been holding for 20 minutes and let himself breathe. A boy named Cecil Hollis III received a phone call that evening that his father made, sitting in the office chair, holding the phone in both hands, beginning with 5 words. Cece, your dad's keeping the shop. A man in a nursing home 12 minutes away, who could no longer say his son's name but could still feel a hand in his, had written an address down in 2018 and left it in a drawer and saved the building from inside a memory he could no longer speak. And a man in a gray baseball cap paid $340 for a brake job. Got into a 1998 Buick Century and drove back toward the highway without telling anyone. He drove the Buick so nobody would look twice. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from tonight. We read every one. If this story moved you, it deserves a like, because this is exactly what the internet needs more of, and exactly what it buries too fast. Subscribe to this community. We find these stories so you never have to miss them. Our next video is going somewhere you are not going to be ready for. We will see you there.